Welcome to the Connection Codes podcast. This is the podcast where we break open our emotion that take us from being disconnected to connected in our relationships and with ourselves. I am your host, Tera, and I'm here with marriage and family therapist, clinical sexologist, Dr. Glenn Hill, and his incredible wife, Phyllis Hill, who puts it all together for us where we can apply it to our lives. We are so excited that you have joined us today in learning more about how to live in connection with each other.
Yeah. Hello, world.
Hello, friends. Wow. Love this week's episode and just answering a listener's question. I just really love that. And I know we're going to read that. But I also just want to say that if you have questions, we are here for that. We want this podcast to matter because these questions, even though this is one specific thing, it resonates with so many people. Did I say that right?
No,
No.
but that's okay.
Okay, what's the right word?
She grew up in Germany. It's not
What's
her
the
fault.
right word?
German is her first language.
Resonates.
Or resignates, which means to quit.
Resonates.
Yeah, resonates.
Wow.
I would have said you got it right.
Thank you,
if you'd
Tera.
asked
Thank
me.
you. But I knew
love
the
it.
word police would be all over that one.
No, I like it that you said it.
Yes, we are diving in today to answer a question from a listener from our Pressures in Sex episode, which we had so many questions about. I'm so glad that we opened up this conversation. And you're right. I know that it does connect with our listeners. This is a question that Wes himself could have written years ago. This conversation started because we were talking about pain from mine and Wes's relationship. And I feel like I'm hearing from him from 5 years past.
Wow.
Yeah, I just want to mention that, every human is unique, therefore every couple is unique. And we talk about all these ideas in theory, but every couple, it's a matter of applying it. So we love it when we get questions because it all gets down to the individual experience, not just a theoretical approach.
100%. All right, so let's dive into the question. And he wrote in and said, can you please verbalize a man's need for sex in a way that a woman can understand and identify with? I want sex, obviously for pleasure, but more importantly for connection. My wife seems to not understand my need, and it's a constant sore spot. Also, she says that I need to be more understanding when she's tired or when she just doesn't want it. I can understand those things. But when it happens over and over, then what about me? What about my needs and feelings? It seems so selfish to say, but it's true. There's a point where it's hard for me to keep understanding when I'm not being understood or validated. And I just feel like we need to start by oohing that man. Ooh,
Yeah.
man.
That's intense.
Yeah.
Wow.
A lot.
That is. And where my mind went immediately was being able to communicate at the core, being able to communicate sexual loneliness. That helps me so much when you communicate in that language that draws me to you. And I know that I've experienced it too, where I've communicated with you sexual loneliness. And when I remember that just recently when I said that to you, you oohed me beautifully. Your response was so great. And then you were like, oh, I think I've missed something. And then you went to the fourth phrase, what do you need? And for me, even that question, it allowed me to say, I need us to slow down. And, we have a great rhythm when it comes to sex, and there's not a lack of that. But I realized that I was experiencing some sexual loneliness. And so in that is when I said, I need us to slow down. And of course, you loved that idea. And we made that happen. So I think it's communicating at the core that really makes such a difference.
Yeah, and every individual's unique, therefore every couple's unique, their dynamic is unique, but typically the male is more driven sexually than the female is. And that's not good, bad, right, or wrong, it just is, and that's certainly true in our relationship. So just for me to be able to convey that, but also one of the things about females that is somewhat different than with your typical male is that the female changes over the lifespan so much. So what worked for Phyllis a year ago, 2 years ago, 5 years ago, whatever, is not necessarily true anymore For Glenn, it's been pretty darn consistent, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
I would love to say, oh, I'm this complex, interesting individual. Well, when it gets down to sexuality, yeah, I guess maybe I am, but not really. It's kind of all the same. And so just to be aware that you need to be able to convey authentically, and of course that requires so much safety.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe that sex is just as vulnerable for males as it is for females. But it is that I don't think there's much that's beyond that as far as just that authentic, core, vulnerable state. And if you don't feel safe with me to be able to say that, and I remember that conversation we had, and you conveyed so much fear in having it, and this has happened more and more just the last 2 or 3 years, where you've been able to be more and more authentic, more and more vulnerable. And I'm always waiting for some big announcement to find out, oh, you have 2 other families somewhere else in the world or something.
Wow.
And because I don't know, you say, oh, I have so much fear in sharing this with you. And then when you share it with me, I would say 99.100% of the time, I'm excited. I mean, I just get flooded with joy about what you're sharing. And it's not something like, oh, crap, this is horrible. It's actually exciting for me. But you got hit with fear. And I'm able to just be present with you and help you process that, which is cool.
Part of where we start with the connection codes is that emotional connection. And, as far as, because sometimes I think, and I believe that this was in the question, is the need that sex kind of fills that void. So if you're not having emotional connection, then the thought is, well, when we have sex, I feel for just a minute or for a few minutes, maybe for a few hours, closer to you. So there's like, it fills a void, but it is really emotional connection that is what's missing. And to get to that, it's being able to find out what's happening with me, which is tuning into my own emotion, which, if you've heard my story, that was very challenging for me. And so when I am able to connect with myself in the emotion and then able to express that to you, Glenn, then it's like, then there's an emotional connection. And I think there's a miss sometimes where we think we know what we need. Like, I think just, and there's times when obviously sex is a driver, sex is a desire, a need. But I think about even in our relationship when we're driving somewhere and we're just, talking and having fun, and you're mentioning then in those moments sexual loneliness or sexual joy, and it's not that in that moment we're going to pull the car over and have sex. It's that even just feeling free to talk about it fills part of that void. Like it fills up that closeness that I'm desiring. I want to be able to banter with you sexually. And I know we've had this conversation even in the last week or two with some couples. And this is actually in these situations, it was the wife who, there's so much shame around sex for her that it's difficult for her to just feel free to banter in that arena, to be able to talk about it the next day, to be able to celebrate it and kind of do the review of, well, what did you like and what was best? And if there is a lot of shame around that for you, it's kind of that realization, I need to figure out what's happening with me, where all this shame is firing, that with my husband, I'm not even free to talk about. And it kind of came out like in the moment, there's a lot of, in the actual sexual moment, there's a lot of fun and joy and positive. And then afterwards, it's that feeling of, oh, that's the bad girl. And even those terms that, a lot of us have heard and have grown up in, it's realizing, wow, that created a whole shame around the whole thing. And it's kind of like the next morning you're going, oh, I can't believe we did that. I can't believe I did that. I can't believe I participated in that. And so then that's the shame. And so I think often for a husband, it's so confusing. Like, wait, you were all into it last night. Now today you're like, won't even talk about it. Well, it's that shame factor. So it's being able to get to that, to connect to that, that we can really speak from the core what's happening with us.
It sounds like she, which I connect with deeply, is at a place where she can even get to that point. Because, he mentioned her being tired, and her not desiring it. And I know that that's where I was for so many years. He actually says later in the email saying that she feels like women are just submitting to their husbands just to have sex, and I was there. And so I get that. It was not a joy experience for me at all. And so I think that one shift happened was when I started experiencing pleasure in sex. That suddenly makes you want to do it more. But when there wasn't anything, it didn't feel like there was anything in it for me, then gosh, it was empty. I felt so empty, and I felt like, not that I was being used, but there were moments I almost felt like I was being used, and that was never his intention. And for him to know that I felt that, is painful for him.
Yeah.
And so I know that the men that are experiencing this are not wanting their wives to just submit to them.
Right.
I really believe that they have a deep desire for their wives to experience this pleasure, for their wives to want to participate. But if she's exhausted, if she may be at a young point in her life where there are things that are blocking her from getting to that point.
Yeah.
I also want to talk about, early in the email, he talks about that men need it for connection. And that we as women don't view it that way. And I can remember early on thinking, oh, this is just a biological need for you. You need to release this on average, 3 days so you can function as a full man. And so it's my job to help you do that. And I think that goes back to how we're taught by movies that we see, television we see. We are seeing men desire sex for the purpose of release and then getting out of bed and leaving the next day. And there's absolutely no connection in it. We do often see in movies the women feeling that connection of the loneliness, the pain, but it really seems just biological for men. So, Glenn, I guess my question for you is, in your study of sexology, I mean, you are an expert, you've studied this field. Is there a tie to experiencing that release? What is released in a man that helps him feel connection? Like, there has to be more than just a biological need there.
Yeah, well, definitely. And there is a biological push, but that's so low level sex drive. It's pretty parallel to using cocaine. So if you snort a line of cocaine, it does feel good. I mean, let's don't be stupid and go, oh, it's just so bad. Well, it can be incredibly detrimental, but there's a big urge there just for the experience. But I've never met the person that's like, oh, well, I snort cocaine because it helps me be a better human being. Well, no, it just feels good in the moment. It's only biochemical in the moment. Well, for most men, I would say, and I've been doing this for a bit, most men, that's the whole experience. It's just, again, I think pretty closely paralleled to just snorting cocaine. Well, there's no question that feels good, but that's not what he really wants. That's just what it's been reduced to. So it's just a chemical rush in the moment. And again, it feels good. So, I'm not going to say that, oh, no, it doesn't. But that's not what he really wants. And also, I've sat with so many couples where they're involved, they have vaginal penetration, where he orgasms, pick a number. I've sat with couples that literally multiple times a day are doing that. And guess what happens the next day? He's just wanting more of that because it's just a cocaine rush. But it's not connecting at all for either one of them. Certainly not for her. It's not connecting for him either. It's just the cocaine rush, just the biochemical response. So, because, and of course, what she's experiencing so often is that, wow, he's the coldest hearted, least interested in me, my experience, so insensitive. I'm tired. And I love what you say, Tera, because and again, we don't know this couple, so we don't know all their details, but I'm convinced if they could get the connection codes and realize that, oh, okay, she doesn't feel safe with me. And I'm amazed at how much couples are involved sexually, considering that for most of them, there is zero benefit for the female. So I'm surprised that for most couples, I would say, at least a very large majority, that's like, why is she involved at all? This is a zero, and which is our story.
Yeah.
I mean, for so many years, and we actually know, this is slightly hilarious, horrible thing. But we know whenever our first two children were conceived, we were involved so seldomly sexually, and our kids always love when we share this. But our oldest daughter, our firstborn, was conceived on Phyllis's birthday. Our secondborn was conceived on my birthday. So again, slightly funny now. It wasn't funny at the time. But that's how rarely we were involved sexually. I don't know why Phyllis was ever involved sexually with her partner, which happens to be me, because there was no benefit for her. This was just and I would suggest maybe it was just a submission thing. It was like, oh, well, I guess I have to. Which, why in the world would the vast majority of women do that?
Yeah.
That's idiotic. And I know it's a weak analogy here, so try not to throw anything at me as women. But I just think about, and we share in the book that Phyllis is not a big shopper. She doesn't like shopping, except at Kirkland's. She loves going to Kirkland's. And I'm not saying this is an exact parallel. I will go to Kirkland's with her for 2-3 hours. And Kirkland's is very small. I mean, it's about as big as a large living room. And we just love it. It's bizarre. Not much. And we just love walking around, reading these sayings. And we'll spend 2 hours and not buy anything, which is bizarre. But I just love being with her because I'm so connected with her. So I'm not doing the Kirkland's thing because I love Kirkland's or I love shopping. I'm doing it because I enjoy her so much. And that's what we see happening. And certainly it's what we happen with us. But we see happening with couples so much is once they get deeply emotionally connected, it changes the whole dynamic as far as the setup for sexuality. Then, in the first protocol with Connection Codes Late Night, is that sex is designed as a party for the female. Then we implement that and shift that. Oh, now it's a whole different ballgame.
Right.
When it's just for him to get his rocks off, I don't understand why she would show up.
Yeah.
I mean, she literally is just a sperm receptacle, just supposed to be available for him, which I would suggest is almost worse than a prostitute. At least you're paying a prostitute. Whereas with her, what's the benefit? What's the takeaway, the gift for her?
Yeah.
And then she doesn't even get paid for it, which I get it. That's a weird, weird thought, but it doesn't make sense. Like, what is her win in this? Nothing. She's just a sperm receptacle. So I don't blame women for going, I'm tired. Well, yeah, you're tired considering there's no takeaway for you. Absolutely.
Well, I do think, though, there are women that have pleasure in it, orgasm in this moment, but the one I'm thinking of women who feel this whole shame thing. So in the moment,
That's a
there
whole nother
is
level,
the pleasure,
Layer.
there is an orgasm, that it's a fun interchange, but there's so much shame afterwards that then it's like you don't want to go towards that. You definitely aren't the initiator for the next time because you have to do something with all of that.
Right.
And if you don't know how to process all that shame, obviously it starts with the processing and then it's the deconstructing of it. Like, oh my word, like getting to the bottom of all of that and realizing if that is your story, that was never meant to be your story. Like that was handed to you. That was a playbook that you were given early in life.
Yeah.
But that was never meant to be it. And so then you kind of have to deconstruct, where in the world did I get that from? Am I still getting it? Am I still getting those messages? And so, there's so many layers in this to take it out of the duty realm.
Yeah.
And that's such a big one because if that is kind of, and I believe that even when I was raised, I heard that terminology all the time. Well, it's just your duty as a wife. Just as it, back in the day, it's like, for so many of us, we heard, well, it's your duty to do the laundry. It's your duty to, to cook the dinner. Like it's your duty because his duty is to go off and go to work and provide. And so there was these lists of duties that was just a playbook we were handed.
Right.
And now for many of us, of course, that has changed so much that we're not even operating in that. We're like, wait, we both work.
Yeah.
So what happened with that?
Right.
It's like things have been turned upside down in so many ways. But it's still a realization of, if we're still in the back of our minds, deep
Mm.
within us, still hearing those messages, it kind of messes with you as far as just being able to, that then it flows into your sexual relationship.
Right. 100%.
Mm.
And it sounds like, I feel like, obviously we don't know this man, but I feel like I
Mm.
can see his heart.
Mm.
And I feel like his heart is saying, I want her.
Mm.
Mm.
And for him to acknowledge, like, I understand when she's tired.
Mm.
I understand when she's like, I'm in no way trying to take advantage of her, but I have this deep desire for connection.
Mhm.
And in our late night course, we talk about the cycle that we get stuck in,
Mhm.
that women need that emotional connection before
Mhm.
connecting sexually. And oftentimes men, that sexual connection allows them to open up emotionally. And so when one of those is off, then we're just stuck in this circle of no one ever connecting sexually or emotionally because someone didn't get that first need.
Yeah, but the difference is typically, and again, there are outliers, but typically the male is able to be involved sexually without emotional connection. And the female can, but it's very difficult and typically painful, whether physically or emotionally, for her. But that's what he's wanting, but he's given up on that happening. And so this is just a situation where, number one, he can get her naked, which is cool. And number two, he can have that cocaine experience, that dopamine rush. So that's not really what he's wanting. We, as far as we know, our data says that 97% of prostitutes are female. There are male prostitutes, but that's a tiny percentage. So a male can go to a female prostitute and be involved sexually. Well, there's not really any, he knows this isn't my best friend. He knows, but it's just that dopamine rush where it's like, oh, well, that feels good. But there's no emotional connection. But what he would really like is to be connected with her emotionally, and that's the best chance he has. Is, well, if I can get her in bed or the backyard or wherever you decide to be, at least then I get to see her somewhat vulnerably. And of course, what he somehow doesn't get, that, oh my gosh, this is such a traumatic, painful experience for her. But I also want to mention just the underlying, which becomes the overbearing scenario in our culture, where we have even these phrases, like we say, oh, well, I want her to talk dirty to me. Well, what makes that dirty? And of course, culturally, it would sound weird to say, I want her to talk cleanly to me. But what makes it dirty? And we even say, they're going to do the dirty. So we have this pre-existing, it is just the bedrock that, and babe, you mentioned earlier that, this woman said, the next day I felt like such a bad girl. Well, what makes that a bad girl? Well, how come she doesn't feel like she was such a good girl? Well, because we have that underlying thing, and this goes back many centuries. And from a faith-based perspective, it's about the 4th to the 5th century where things really shifted. That Clement of Alexandria, as far as I know, is the oldest extant writings we have, that he began saying, putting limitations, that, well, you can't be involved sexually on the high holy days. And then it expanded and expanded. And if I remember correctly, it got down to about 21 days a year that you were even allowed to be involved sexually. And of course, then the priesthood went officially single men. So, and of course, how bizarre it is to even think in a group where all the leaders are single men. I don't know. How are women going to make out in that group? How's marriage going to make out? How's sexuality going to make out? And as we know, historically, it did not do real well, which I am convinced is what ushered in the Dark Ages. There are other factors as well, but that was a big part of it. So our whole mentality is that this is a dirty, negative thing, as opposed to something just to be celebrated, so that these two can. And then you mentioned just the shame, because that's where so much of that shame comes for men too, but I think probably a little bit more for women typically.
Yeah, I think it's just, I hurt for both of them so much,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
I was actually thinking about it yesterday, about the early days for Wes and I, and him being vulnerable with me, and him telling me, like, he was sitting on the couch, we had a pink chair, and he's just like desperate. He was desperate for more. And I could hear it in his voice. But I had just had my 4th kid. I'm nursing a baby, what felt like around the clock. I was nursing a baby around the clock. I'm taking care of these toddlers. And I was depleted.
Mm-hmm.
I had nothing to give him. I had nothing to give myself. But I can still see and hear his pain.
Mm-hmm.
And I wish that I could go back, and I don't know what I would change about that. Maybe I would discover more how to feel good earlier on, because again, there was nothing in it for me. Exactly what you're saying. I was a warm body for him, and which is so much pain for him.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, I couldn't change my life moments, of that exhaustion that I was in. And so I was just thinking, I just wish I could tell every couple that are in their late 20s and early 30s, like they say it gets better. It gets better. Like I just really want to give that hope, having that intentionality, us doing the foundations course first, and then us doing the late night course next, gave us that intentionality to come together and really work on this. Now that our youngest kid is 3, like we can focus on this part of our life and have fun in a new way. And it took that effort. It took that us both deciding to do it. But I just really want to tell him, like, there's hope on the other side. If you have young kids, just hang in there. Hang in there for dear life and do these courses, and you'll make it to the other side.
Yeah, but I do have to say it doesn't get better just because we sit with tons of couples that have been married for 15, 20, 25, 30, 35 or more years that it didn't get better because they're just doing the same old thing they've always done.
100%.
If they don't have new information and a new approach, it's not just going to automatic. And again, for some couples, maybe it does, but I would suggest that for the majority of couples, it does not. So that's why we stress so much for people to read the book, do foundations, then do late night, because late night is built on top of the foundation of the connection codes. I'm also so fascinated. I've just casually begun researching this a little bit, because what Phyllis and I started discovering a few years ago, as we became freer and freer and safer with each other, I'm amazed, and I don't claim to understand it yet, but whenever we're able to sexually banter with each other, when there's safety, I'm able to try to find the sexual innuendo in every third sentence that she says.
Yes.
It's so sexually connecting. And that's bizarre to me. That doesn't make sense because we're not actually involved sexually. It's just the safety where I can make comments, sexual comments, and she does a little, but not nearly as much as I do. And like literally, we're laying in bed, we're falling asleep, and I feel so sexually connected to her. It's like, wait, you didn't do anything sexual, but just that safety of being able to banter, to share, to reference sexual things from whatever, maybe 2 days before, or, I remember, last month whenever we were away at this, beach, and wow, you really rocked my world. And that, just the sharing of it is sexually connecting, which makes no sense because it's not actually a sexual activity. And yet there's something that, and I think it's just brain chemistry. There's something that's firing in my brain. I'm like, oh, this is my sexual friend. And we didn't actually do anything actively sexually. It's fascinating.
Let's say we're not there yet. I do want to say that because, like, I love hearing you say that y'all can talk that way and it not lead to anything, and it's so connecting. We are still at a point where if sex comes up and we talk about it, moves are being made within seconds. To where recently we were riding in the car and he starts talking, we're talking about it, and he's like already okay, getting ready for as soon as we get home because we were very close to our house. And I was like, bud, I need to know that we can talk about sex without it leading to sex. Like, I need to know that we can have these conversations. Otherwise, it makes me not want to talk about sex with you.
Yeah.
Because again, I'm just not at a point in my life. We still have young kids. Like, I'm not doing it every day, like at the moment's notice. And so we're still having to work through that part of me having to say, like, we can talk about it without it leading to something. But I have to remind him, this is not going anywhere after this.
Do you know what happens for Wes in that moment? Or what? Well, that, but also what is happening for him that's the way it plays out in his psyche?
Where he wants to have sex? Or what do you mean? What part?
Yeah, but it almost sounds like I'm conjecturing here, which is always dangerous. It almost sounds like a desperation thing that as soon as it's brought up, he's like, oh my gosh, so great, we're going to be involved sexually.
I don't think it's I think it's like an excitement. It's like it brought up, now I have joy and now I want to have sex with you, because he's, I mean, he'll go anytime, anywhere, whatever, like
Right.
ready. And so I think he just gets excited. Also, we spent so many years not talking about sex.
Right. And that's what I wonder, if it's a trauma response. And again, I don't know. I haven't talked to Wes about that, but that was certainly true for me whenever we first started getting a little bit of traction and connection sexually. Then I actually became more desperate. But that was because of the trauma response, because we were only going to be involved sexually on our birthdays and I guess probably anniversary too, for a few years. So it was desperate for me. And so, because there was a period of time where it's just like, yeah, nothing's going to happen, basically hardly ever. And then as we began being involved sexually more, it ignited it within me, like, oh my gosh, so now we can be involved sexually every day or maybe twice a day. And now there's just so much stability for the two of us that I'm never, and again, every couple's unique, so I don't claim there's a scientific formula here, but there are times that we may not be involved sexually for a number of days, and we don't track it. I don't even know how many days that might be, and I don't even notice it. I'm not even aware. And then there are times that we're involved sexually 3 times in a day, and I don't notice that either. I mean, I do notice that we were.
Okay.
but it's not like this crazy.
Wow.
I just didn't want to insult you on
Yeah, thank you.
a public forum here. But it's just so consistent that whether we're actively involved sexually or not, it's the same level of sexual connection, which is, again, it's new enough to me. It's kind of bizarre.
You know what helps me in the sexual banter back and forth, and for, in the moment, it's just banter, like it's just fun. But when
you might want to point out, I'm really, really clever as far as sexual innuendos.
Well, that is true.
That may be where people are missing us on this.
Yes. But, well, your banter is pretty constant. As you mentioned, every third sentence you find a way to fit it in. But
Well, you're really bad at setting me up because you
Right,
just
right.
constantly say sexual things.
yes, oh,
It's not really me, it's more
right.
you.
But I'm also thinking about when we actually banter back and forth, like, or maybe to explain banter, because there is just, maybe that means one thing. I'm talking about like when you're talking about a fantasy or there's more to it. And I think what's great is I make space for that. But I also am going, I'm thinking about the schedule. I'm thinking about like, oh, when we get home, we're going to have company there. Or
Right.
like for you, Tera, oh, the kids are going to be home, or the kids are going to be home in 10 minutes kind of thing. And so then I'm able to process my emotion and say, oh, I'm feeling some sadness that this isn't possible because, the Joneses are coming over and
And sorry to interrupt, but that is so identity bringing for me. And I believe it's genuine. I don't think she's just BSing. But when she said, oh, sad, when we get home, the Joneses are going to be there within 3 minutes. And I believe it's genuine for her. It's a sad experience. Well, then I receive so much energy and so much identity. And again, that's sexually connecting, which we're not being involved sexually.
Yeah.
But just the fact that she says that, I'm like, oh, okay, I'm her sexual friend. It's again, bizarre to me.
And so I think that's really powerful for me to hear you and to have fun in the conversation, but then to also show up for myself and be able to say, because often Glenn doesn't know our schedule. Like he doesn't know the next thing, but also he doesn't know what all it's going to take. Because even if the Joneses don't arrive for another 30 minutes, it's like, but I've got to get home and cook dinner, and I've got to do this and I've got to do that. And so for me just to be able to say that is very important for him. He doesn't then get a still face, which is so huge. Like I think in the early days, I would just like, we would have this banter and then I would start to panic and then I would just shut down. And instead of saying, or even being able to say, oh, I feel some fear that we're not going to be able to do anything today. Cause remember X, Y, and Z. And
again, there's so much identity in that.
And
for me, like, oh, she's aware of me. She's tuned into me.
That was so huge. That has been so huge. And
try not to keep repeating that so huge.
Right. Sorry.
Because that's insane.
Yeah. But I wanted to go back to what you were saying. And now there's been a lot of minutes between, but you were just saying being able to have the freedom and safety to just talk about sex, like what we say, sexual
Yep.
banter. I think about that for people, and maybe this would be helpful for the listener. Like if you're, I think if you're a foodie, and you just have great experiences in restaurants, or you're an incredible cook and you love to just talk about, oh my gosh, wasn't last night's dinner incredible? And oh my word, I can't wait till this Friday night. I think we should go to such and such. And it's that kind of banter that brings joy. Like it is a connecting of conversation. And, it's funny to me because Glenn and I are not foodies, and we're always up to going to a new restaurant, but we don't ever think about it. And so we don't initiate it. And then we get with friends who are real foodies, and it's just funny because they'll go, "Oh, have you tried this new restaurant?" And they mention it, and we go, "Oh no." Well, then the conversation just kind of ends right there. We go on to a different conversation because we don't have anything to banter about. We haven't been there. We don't know that place, and And I noticed this with Glenn. He is quite the wine connoisseur kind of guy, and if he finds someone else that has that same passion, oh my word, they can talk wine for too many minutes, and it's a connector. And art. Glenn really loves and appreciates art, and if he finds someone else that knows who Monet is, or who Monet is maybe more common. Picasso, we all kind of know who that is, but Durer or some others. It's like when you connect with someone on that, you can just keep going, and that's such a cool thing. And I think that is kind of behind the sexual connection, is realizing that is what sexual banter is. It's not to say that in that moment you're going to go to the next restaurant. In that moment, you're going to be able to go buy another piece of art or to go have a glass of wine. It's not about that. It's about the conversation and the fun that is. But then that takes me back to, you got to figure out what's happening with you. And I think whether it's male or female, I more commonly hear this from women, that if there's a shame associated with it,
Yep.
it's like, I don't want to talk about that. And I'm so flooded with shame after that I'm stuck in that. And so it's a realization of, wow, this is where we are in this, and this is where we've got to get to that for yourself, is that the processing of that, the finding of that, the tuning into that, figuring out, whoa, where did this come from in my life? And it's the deconstruction of it.
Yeah, and typically in that situation, of course, we hear this over and over again. The husband is going to resist her energy, and he's going to go, "We're married. You're my wife.
Right.
You should be able to talk about this and certainly be able to do it." And he just made it worse.
Yeah.
And we always say you can be totally correct and absolutely wrong. He's totally correct as far as the information, absolutely wrong relationally, and she will never be invited into that conversation because he just shut her down. And if he literally can use the three phrases in that moment and go, "Oh, wow, so help me get that. What happens for you there? I feel like I'm missing something. Catch me up." No, he's missing it because she hasn't said it yet. He's not missing it because he's evil.
Yeah.
He's missing it. I mean, we always frame it that way, that this is not, you need to explain yourself better, which nobody responds well to that.
Yeah.
But to be able to say, "Hey, could you help me get that? Because it sounds important and you're really important to me. So I want to make sure that I get caught up and I get that." And again, it's so inviting, and it's going to take her X number of times. And I don't know what X is. It might be 3, it might be 19, it might be 87. So hurry up and get to X for him to invite her and let her process that through. And again, it's not magic fairy dust. It's not one time and it's magically fixed forever. She may need to process that over and over again, and for him to invite her into that. And again, it could be vice versa, but typically it's going to be the female as far as our experience goes.
Well, what a powerful episode.
Yeah.
I just love that. Are we ready to close it out, or do you have
before
something
we
else?
move on to the will, I do want to acknowledge that he mentioned that he is wanting to get all in and do the connection codes journey and dive deeper into it.
Yeah.
But there is some, I'm assuming fear for her. She is hesitant to do it because she doesn't want to dive deeper into her feelings. Yeah. And I get that.
Oh,
you know,
yes.
She probably thinks that just means I have to have sex more often. Well, shoot. You know,
Yeah.
and she's already struggling with that.
I
And
get
so the
that.
connection codes equals, well, that just means I have to be a sperm
Wow.
receptacle more frequently. No, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
And so
absolutely.
what would you say to a couple that's experiencing that when there's a man or a woman wanting to go on this journey and the other partner is hesitant at the time to do it with
Yeah.
him?
Well, it's always the ooh is the correct response in the three phrases. Just to ask, babe, what happens there for you? Help me get that. I feel like I'm missing something. And for the partner to be able to process through what the block is.
Yeah.
Because there's a legitimate block. This person isn't saying no because they're idiots or morons or evil or awful. There's something that's blocking her from diving in, from jumping
Yeah.
in, from being all in. And he needs to help her process through that.
I think a beautiful thing is asking,
Mm.
would you do this with me, babe?
Yeah.
There's such a difference when you put it on yourself. Like, would you do this for me? Would you? And I think, if you feel like you're stuck as a couple, like even one session
Yeah.
with Dr. Hill can make such a difference. Even to go into that session just going, I'm stuck here, and to know that Glenn is so great about connecting to what's happening with you and to
Yeah.
really hearing someone's heart. And this couple in particular, I think about maybe she needs kind of a safe space to be able to say
Wow.
the fear or say the whatever's happening with her
Yeah.
in all of this. And for him as the husband who does have more space for this to go, would you do this with me? If I book a session with Dr. Hill, would you do this with me? If I bought the master class, would you do this with me? If I bought the book, could we read this together? Like I think sometimes too, as women, we already have so much on our plate.
Right.
And the idea of you need to do this, you need to figure this out, you need to be involved. It's that pointing of the finger. That's just one more thing. Like
Yeah.
I don't even have the energy to wash the dishes at night. And you're wanting me to do one more thing.
Right. Right.
And so even in the wording and even in the what do you need, babe?
Yeah.
And she may so simply go, I need help at the house.
Yeah.
And something he may be totally not in tune to. And so I think sometimes we miss each other, but we miss each other just barely. And so
I get
that would
that.
be my hope for this couple.
Yeah, and also for him to convey to her authentically that I feel so much joy about doing something like this with
Yeah.
you because you matter to me. You are that valuable. Because she and we don't know this couple, but she probably views this as an attack that, okay, this is something else you have to do, as opposed to him conveying authentically, I feel so much joy by doing this with you because I want to be your friend.
Yeah.
I want to be your safe partner, and I don't know how to do that.
Yeah.
And I've been pretty crappy at that for way too long. And this would really help me learn how to be present, how to be safe for you. Could we do this together? And it changes the dynamic as opposed, because that's what I did for Phyllis for so many years. I just read a book and then I'm like, here, you need to read this book. And she would, I don't want to say never, she would never read the books because I was just pushing it on her from a good intention, but I just the presentation was awful.
Yeah. I love the idea of him partnering with her
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
and finding out how can I support you? How can I help you? And we can do this together. I love that thought, especially if she's vocalizing that she's exhausted.
Yeah.
That's a way of saying I may need more help
Yeah.
doing something.
Yeah. And for him to convey to her, babe, I think I'm missing
Yeah.
something. I mean, I'm dumb as a brick sometimes, and I just miss stuff, and I think I'm missing with you because obviously I'm not getting it. I'm missing it. Could you help me get what I'm missing
Yeah.
with this? And then to be able to be present with her when because she'll tell you eventually, not always immediately, but she'll tell you what you're missing.
Wow.
Awesome. Do you want to go into our will?
Yeah, absolutely.
Core emotion will?
Yes. I can start.
Are we doing it about sex or what are we
No,
doing here?
just I would say in
Okay.
general.
All
Yeah.
right.
So a lot of joy about the group of friends we had over last night. That was really special, incredible, positive energy. Let's see, feeling fear about the intensive weekend coming up, just in the tasks that need to be done between now and Thursday. Just feeling some fear about that. Felt guilt yesterday when, man, multiple times I missed
Mm.
with you,
Mm.
and I was a second too late.
Mm.
Like, instead of expressing my fear, I kind of pointed at you
Mm.
instead. So I missed on that.
Mm.
And I think I always have shame around that
Mm.
it hurts you so much. And so then I see the hurt, and then I realize, oh my word, I didn't say the emotion. I just said the thing, you know. Um, Sadness. Um, I think that my interaction this morning with your mom, just felt
Mm.
sadness about that she
Yeah.
was hurt but didn't tell me, and that
Mm.
she
Mm.
I didn't even know what she was referencing, so I really
Right.
missed it with her. So
Mm.
feel sad, and because I know it just crushes her, but she doesn't know how to say it. So um, let's see. I mentioned hurt more, being aware of your hurt,
Mm.
and just that's the feeling, like I can feel
Right.
that when I hurt you, I feel the hurt.
Mm.
Let's see, anger. I think that this weekend we sat with a couple, and I had a moment of
Mm.
actually an outburst, which is very rare for me.
Yes, you did.
But they had seen a therapist for
Mm.
years that didn't help them, and
Mm.
didn't tune into her at all. And it was interesting because the topic was about sex, and they never got to her shame,
Mm.
because it was all just about the action or not action,
Right.
And so I just came out of my seat, actually, and just said, wow, I feel so much anger towards him.
Mm.
And they both were startled, because they were like, who are you? And I go, your therapist said he didn't tune into her shame.
Yeah.
Um, let's see, loneliness. I think I felt loneliness on Sunday. We were at a party, and I wasn't feeling alone, but I could tell that others
Mm.
were.
Mm.
And I felt kind of like that responsibility to
Mm.
try to engage with everyone, and I wanted others to be aware, but they weren't. And so I really felt that loneliness in that time.
Yeah.
I think I covered all 8.
Yeah, you got him.
Cool. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. Most of mine are connected to this coming up weekend because we have a group intensive. A lot of joy in that because
Yeah.
these are powerful, powerful experiences,
Yeah.
but fear in it too, because I know these people are flying in from around the world and entrusting themselves, their hearts, their psyches, their relationship, their lives with us. And that's a
Yeah.
big responsibility.
Yeah.
A little bit of loneliness in that just because I know it's kind of on me, and we have a team around us, which is awesome.
Yeah.
But I also know that ultimately I'm responsible for actually where it gets down to it, where
Yeah.
we said where the rubber meets the road. That these
Right.
couples are here, they're right here. All right, when Marcus said go,
Yeah.
and that if I don't, whatever, if I don't produce, if I'm not on point, we're going to miss a lot with them. A little bit of shame in that because there's so many things that I just miss. I'm really, really thankful for our team now that handles stuff, but more and more, my percentage keeps shrinking that as far as what I'm actually handling. And so I frequently get hit with shame that I'm just not competent in so many different areas. A lot of anger this past weekend, realizing that this couple been married a long time. I've been going to therapists, counselors, marriage retreats endlessly. And the vast, vast majority of it was just do this action,
Right.
do this other action, add this one more action. And then, and it, I don't like saying never, but it never connected them at all. A little bit of hurt yesterday when we were standing at the sink.
Yeah.
I feel like you weren't present with me in that moment. What am I missing here? Fear, joy,
Guilt.
guilt.
Did you say guilt?
Yeah, and guilt even in that moment at the sink that you missed it, but then I let the cycle speed up. And we didn't have a cyclone, but I forgot the connection codes in that moment. It's like, oh, Glenn, you moron, what the hell's wrong with you, boy? It's the connection codes. Ask her what happened for her. It's 3 phrases. And so, yeah.
We all miss
guilt.
Glenn.
I feel guilt when I miss that. Did I say sad?
I don't think so.
I don't remember. Yeah, and for me, the sadness with my mom. She's 94, and I think that's the biggest sadness with her is just that she's 94. There's probably not going to be a big shift in the next year or 2 or 3. And just that she's had a life where she's missed this. And the vast majority of it because she did not have safety. She did not have presence from the people around her from infancy, really. And that's so heavy for me and just being with her in that.
I get that.
So good. Thank you both for always being vulnerable and sharing. I think it's so connecting for everyone to hear in real time what this actually looks like. And then also people that are experiencing those similar pains to understand that they're not alone. And to this couple who wrote in this question, I want to give you hope that with intentionality, for
Absolutely.
truly, this is a letter that Wes could have written 5 years ago.
Yeah.
And I just want you to know that we see both of you. We see both of your pain and just how lonely that season could be because you may not have other people you can turn to and talk to in that. But this is why we've created the connection codes.
Absolutely.
This is why the Foundations Masterclass exists. This is why late night exists.
Yeah.
So we can help couples find connection in the way you receive it,
Yeah.
for both of you and connecting at your core. So thank you all for listening, for being here. Please share this episode. If you have not already left us a 5-star review
Yes.
you can leave them on Spotify now and your podcasting app. And also on Spotify, you can watch. There's video now available there. So if you want to watch this episode live, you can do it on YouTube or on Spotify now.
Fun.
And so, Glenn, you want to close us out?
I love it. Yeah, and we do all of this because you need this.
You deserve this.
So let's
Let's
do
do
this.
this.
Let's do this.